The production of this video was made possible by donors to the Orchestration Online Patreon initiative. Please consider adding your support to the creation of free educational internet resources by visiting our Patreon page linked below.
Should I mark all the articulations in every bar of my score and parts?
The answer to this question is no, but it's not as simple as that. There are two opposing forces at work, which complicate what should be a basic approach. On the one side, you have the needs of the musician. What they want to see in a passage are clear markings, but clear does not equal detailed. Assuming a section of music with constant staccato articulation, all that's required is one bar of marked notes. It's the equivalent of putting the word pizzicato on the first bar, or molto tenuto. If it's not required to put those words in every single bar, then it's also not necessary to mark staccato over every single note. In fact, it's damn distracting. What's more, some musicians take it as a patronizing attitude on the part of the composer, as if you can't trust them to understand that the articulation is constant. On the other side, we have new technological steps built into the process of composing. Nearly every composer these days uses notation software, relying on playback of their scores as part of their everyday work of proofing. There's often pressure on the composer to try to get this playback to be as exact as possible, for their own sense of accomplishment, if nothing else. On a production level, playback demos might be needed for approval by musically illiterate clients, or as reference by singers and presenters, or as mock-ups for film cues. In this case, the playback may rely heavily on the most precise sound possible. Logistically, this means that every bar in a score might need to have its articulations marked in order to achieve this effect. Furthermore, many composers might not even know a reason not to mark every note, up to the point where they watch this video, or talk to an orchestral musician, of course. And if those notes are all painstakingly marked, then can the composer be trusted to unmark them for the convenience of the musician? Will there even be the time? From the standpoint of quick turnovers and constant deadlines, the answer may very well be no. But that's still no excuse for not doing what's right and giving in to the inevitable. There are always exceptions. In passages of mixed articulation, where the odd note here or there is staccato or whatever, then you should definitely mark all those which apply. And then there are always exceptions to the exceptions. If your mixed markings have a predictable pattern that's closely tied to note lengths, phrasing, dynamics, and/or a rhythmic pulse, then you may need only mark a few bars of it. One last little bit of perspective from the musician's point of view. Beyond all considerations of aesthetic annoyance and hurt pride, there's also the very real danger of disconnecting the player from the music with so many instructions. Once a strategy for expression has been established, then the musicians can dig in and apply their skill and engagement to performing. A constant stream of staccato or accent marks tends to separate the player's sense of unity and surrender to the music, forcing their thoughts to constantly obey rather than flow naturally.
Hey there, this is your orchestration tutor Thomas Goss, with a little more advice about marking articulations. As I mentioned at the end of the last orchestration question video about restating dynamics, if you're unsure, or if you want to firmly establish a particular approach, then use the word sempre, meaning always. Sempre can be added to abbreviated markings for staccato or tenuto if you like. I recommend that articulation marks still be provided alongside the text for the first bar or two. When the articulated passage is finished, you may cancel the approach with the word norm, short for the Italian normale, but often you won't need to because of the obviously changing context of the music. This relates to the way some notation applications are set up for playback. In Sibelius, you can actually set up your score to have only one bar of staccato or tenuto, with continuing articulation just by adding the word in expression text below the staff. You can even hide it if you want to, by selecting the text and then typing Shift-Control-H or Shift-Command-H for Mac. This triggers a sound ID change in the Sibelius Playback Dictionary, which can be reset back to normal, once again with the word norm. The drawback is that this convenient workaround doesn't necessarily function for all sound sets, so you may need to tinker a bit. Let's look at a few scores now to see how composers and engravers have marked articulations in published scores. The first thing to think about is that the quality of staccato is often inherent in the character of the music itself, especially for older eras like classical and Baroque. For instance, in very fast symphonic movements, especially with a 6/8 time signature, staccato is so obviously intertwined with the music that few composers in the classical period would have bothered to mark it. We can see this in the Michael Haydn Symphony No. 18 that I'm using as background music for this video. The finale movement lacks any kind of staccato markings, but the work would be unplayable without that light, springy articulation. Copyists are often uneven in their approach to marking parts and scores. In the first oboe part to the right of Spring, the passage from Figure 29 is marked forte staccato sempre, but then after a tacit, 8 more bars of staccato are fully marked. There are many such passages in which the composer or copyist chose to mark all articulations, especially in a complex score where certain passages are highlighted, or combined in a complex texture, such as in the second oboe part from the right of Spring's introduction, where Stravinsky could easily have marked sempre staccato, yet probably chose not to so that the articulations would stand out in the score more clearly. You can see from other scores that any articulation style marked sempre is considered to have come to an end whenever the player comes to a rest. For instance, in the first piccolo part to Mercury from the Planets, Holst marks sempre staccato after Figure 8, but then after the next tacit puts in all the staccato markings, even though the continuation would seem to speak for itself. I've seen a lot of anxiety in the Orchestration Online community from composers who are very afraid of losing control by leaving out articulation markings. But I've rarely seen such an issue come up in rehearsal with competent players. Probably in the case of film music recording sessions, a composer might want to leave in most or all of the articulation markings, but overkill can still occur even in cases where the music is only half a minute to a minute long. Thanks for joining me again in this mini marathon of orchestration question videos. If all goes as planned, one more video will be coming up in 2 or 3 days.